lovely card fighters. I hope you all are having a wonderful day today. This is Apex Rex, your Tachikaze veteran here, with a very special deck profile. So, this deck, I have a weird relationship with this deck. It's almost like a love story with this deck. Um, so, back in V, I was really struggling with Tachikaze. I was losing a lot and I just didn't feel good about it, so I was like, I'll just try different decks. So I tried different decks on CFA with my friend and I tried out Hanzo because Hanzo looked cool to me. And I immediately fell in love with the combos. I love that you could go protect one or protect two depending on matchup. Um, I loved that you can abuse on place effects with it, so you could like keep cycling Magatsu Gale and Sakura Fubuki. So Hanzo was kind of a side piece that I started picking up, a pet deck, if you will. I think a pet deck is a good way to describe it. But unfortunately, I ran into some financial issues and I had to sell the deck, and I was absolutely heartbroken about doing that. And it just always stuck in the back of my mind. No matter what deck I was playing, no matter what format I was playing, I just kept thinking about Hanzo. So when me and my friends started getting into premium, I decided that I wanted to build a real life deck because we were playing on CFA again. But I wanted to build a real life deck. So I went on TCG Player and I bought all of the cards raw and built it up from scratch. I built a premium Hanzo deck because with Tasagare Hanzo, and just the strides, there are so many cool things that you can do with that deck. And the reason why it's an odd relationship is when I got that deck, I promised myself I am never going to sell or get rid of this deck again. It meant that much to me. But I've been really struggling because I've been doing a lot of training with Tachis and everything, but I'll be honest, aggro's not really my playstyle. It's more like I like tempo and mid range, which Nubatama is absolutely tempo and mid range. So it fits more my playstyle, and I asked myself like, okay, if I was gonna go to a major tournament, which deck would I feel more confident taking? And it was Hanzo. So as it stands right now, Tachis are still near and dear to my heart, but this deck is my most competitive deck. This deck I am confident in going into a competition with. So, without further ado, here is the deck profile. Right, here we go. We are going to open up with our starter, Stealth Dragon Magatsu Wind. Like most V starters, this unit has the ability when rode upon, draw a card, then if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 1 or greater, put a quick shield ticket into your hand. That quick shield ticket is useful for a lot because there are a lot of discard effects in this deck. Also, fun fact, the reason why I picked Magatsu Wind in particular is Magatsu Wind is actually the first Vanguard card I ever owned. Back in Limit Break format, a friend of mine trying to get me in the game gave me a box of cards and said, here, take any card you want, and that'll be your first Vanguard card. And I picked Magatsu Wind because something about the art really appealed to me, so that is my choice for our Nubatama starter. Here we go. This is Turbo Hanzo. Starting off, we have the main centerpiece of the deck. We have Evil Stealth Dragon Akatsuki Hanzo. So, he is mostly used for the name in this deck. He doesn't have a lot of interaction with himself. However, he does have a very useful ability that can sometimes come up if you're going first, or in some cases you may want to use this ability instead of striding. In very rare cases, if you can just get a heavy enough minus on your opponent. But his ability is act once per turn, retire 2 grade 0 rear guards. This unit gets plus 20k until end of turn. Choose any number from all rear guards and return them to hand. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, your opponent chooses cards from his or her hand equal to the number of cards that he or she returned with this effect and discards them. So sometimes you can use it early game to bounce some of your on-place rear guards to recycle their effects and get the plus 20k for more aggression. Like I said, if your opponent has like a field full of rear guards, say they're like Excel and they've like Gold Paladin or something, and their field is just full of rear guards, and maybe you would want to go into this because that can be a very heavy minus on your opponent. They have to choose between cards to guard with and cards that they want to keep to do their plays next turn. So kind of useful, very situational, but again, we mostly run this for the name. Also, if you didn't know, this deck revolves around evil decoy tokens. If you did not know, an evil decoy token is a grade 0 with 5k shield that says it cannot attack or boost, and it can intercept from the back row. It has the intercept ability, so you can use it to guard, but also it pays for a lot of the costs in this deck. This is an example. So, moving on with that, we will go into the main piece that we will be turboing into in this deck. We have Evil Stealth Dragon Tasogare Hanzo. So, this card has a few abilities that can create multiple forms of advantage. His first ability is hand at the beginning of your opponent's turn. If your Vanguard is Evil Stealth Dragon Akatsuki Hanzo, discard 2 cards from your hand, ride this card at rest, and all of your rear guards get plus 5,000 shield until end of turn. At the end of the turn, ride an Evil Stealth Dragon Akatsuki Hanzo from your soul as rest. So that ability alone can generate multiple protect markers into your hand. Protect 1 mainly is what we're going into this deck, but in rare cases you may want to go protect 2, so have both markers on hand, I'd say, because you can turn all of your evil decoy tokens into 10k intercepts, and you can even set up plays where you have 4 on board, which is an extra 40k shield that may actually save you in the long run. So this card is already very useful for that, but it has a second ability. Soul, when your Vanguard with Hanzo in its card name attacks, retire a grade 0 and call this unit to rear guard. Until end of turn, this unit gets plus 20,000 and can attack from the back row. At the end of the turn, put this unit into your soul, and if put, you call an evil decoy token to rear guard. So basically, you can pop your evil decoy token, call this out, get an extra attack for 32k, and then pop it back in. And it specifically says Hanzo Vanguard, so even if you were to ride this instead of Akatsuki Hanzo, you can trigger this ability. And then you can ride Akatsuki Hanzo later, and then boom, you have another one in Soul. So this card is the main piece that we are turboing into. This card puts an insane amount of pressure on the opponent, especially with the stride package that we're running. So this is a key, I wouldn't say win con, sometimes it's a win con, but mostly it's mid-game pressure for sure. On with the grade 3s again, we will have Stealth Rogue of Prescription Mizukaze. Speaking of win cons, this is one of the deck's win cons. It has an absolutely brutal guard restrict ability. Yeah, guard restrict ability. It has one simple effect. When placed, Soul Blast to grade 3, and until end of turn, your opponent cannot call grades that he or she had called this turn from hand to guard circle. So already alone, this is brutal. Basically, if your opponent uses a grade 0 to guard 1 attack, they will not be able to call another grade 0 to rear guard for the rest of the turn. This only applies to hands, so your opponent can G-guard to get around it, But with the multiple attacks you'll be doing with Tasagari Hanzo, this card basically guarantees that you are going to get at least one hit in if you have at least two Tasagari Hanzos in Soul. So this is a very powerful card that is definitely worth the Soul Blast Grade 3. And then, of course, we have Sure Stealth Dragon, Momio Kongo. It is our heal guardian, not much to explain here. Early game defense, grade 3, so you can pitch it for stride, and it's a heal, so you can use it for G Guardians. Everyone knows what these do, so yes, we will play 4 of those. Now on to the grade 2s. We have the main early game draw engine of this deck. We have Stealth Dragon, Magatsu Gale. This unit says Vanguard or Rearguard when placed, Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, draw a card, and this unit gets plus 6,000 until end of turn. Also, it has Rearguard. At the end of the battle that it attacked, put this unit into your soul and return one of your Rearguards to your hand. So you can recycle key pieces like on place abilities back into your hand, or kind of mirage your board if you're facing against any kind of like control deck, specifically Link Joker. This deck plays around Link Joker really well, actually. But the fact that it's an on-place effect means that you can use this, pop it back to your hand with Katsuki Hanzo if you're going first, and then replay it to gain more value. It also replenishes the soul, which is an important thing for this deck. So this card is all of the utility that this deck could ask for in one package. So definitely run out of 4 of. Next, we will have 4 Evil Stealth Dragon, Yamishibuki. So this card has 2 very important abilities. First one is during your turn, this unit gets plus 5,000 for each of your grade 0 rear guards. This is nice because it'll generally be 19k and you don't have to boost with it in order for it to get to 19k. So it's a nice beater. Also early game. Also says when it attacks, counterblast 1 and return one of your rear guards to your hand. Call up to 2 evil decoy tokens to rear guards. This is one of our main evil decoy token producers. And it gives itself a buff once you do that, so this is a very important piece to tie the whole deck together. It's important for one of our main strides, and there's also another card that combos between this and Magatsu Gale that you can do on turn 2 that I will get to later on into the video. And then lastly, we have Mode of Stealth Rogue Tsumugi. This is a D standard card. This is one of the ways that we can get Tasagari Hanzo into Soul without having to use the Ride ability. It says when this unit is placed on rearguard, Soul Blast 1, choose a normal unit with Stealth in its card name or the Glitter ability from your drop and put it into your Soul. You can discard a Tasagari Hanzo for Stride and then call this rearguard and pop it into Soul. So this is how you get it out of the drop zone. Very important. We have multiple angles of getting Tasagari Hanzo into the soul, and this is a very important one. Especially if you use Mizukaze to Soul Blast Tasagari Hanzo, you can use this to pop it right back into your soul. So, very important. And now with that, we are on to the grade 1s. We have our next token producer and another piece to Turbo Tasagare. We have Evil Stealth Dragon Kage Sarashi. His ability is Act, retire this unit, call up to 2 Evil Decoy tokens to rearguard. If you have a Vanguard with Hanzo in its card name, put a card from your hand into Soul, search your deck for up to 1 card with Hanzo in its card name, reveal it, and put it into your hand, and shuffle your deck. This ability can only be used by a card with the same name once per turn, so it has a hard once per turn ability. But this allows you to take Tasagari Hanzo from your hand and put it into your soul, and then search out another one that you can later discard to use with the grade 2 that we went over earlier. So tons of ways to get those Tasagari Hanzos into soul, and this alone also, because it produces 2 evil decoy tokens, is very important for setting up your plays. Because of the hard once per turn, we run it as a 3 of. I think that's perfectly fine. It makes room for other grade 1s in the lineup, so that's that for that. Next up, we have Evil Stealth Dragon Gyokusen. This is a very important piece because it combos with one of our strides very well. It has 2 abilities. Drop Zone, when your grade 3 Vanguard is placed, Counterblast 1, put this card into your hand and choose a grade 3 card in your soul, put it to your hand. If you put a card from your soul to your hand, bind this card. You really are just going to be returning this card. You're not going to use it for its other ability. There's no reason to, really, with the way the deck is set up. Its main skills, its other ability, is when it's returned from hand to rear guard by your card's ability, Soul Blast 1 and call up to 2 evil decoy tokens to open rear guard circles. So, we are mainly running this as a combo piece with one of our strides because this actually leads you to get 7 attacks your first stride turn. So this is very important to see for that combo. I will go more into the combo when we get to that stride. Then we have 3 Stealth Fiend Forktail, another D standard card. This card says, when placed on rearguard, you may look at the top 7 cards of your deck. If you do, choose up to 1 normal unit with stealth in its card name or the glitter ability from among them and put it into your soul and shuffle your deck. This is the last piece that we're running to turbo Tasagare into soul. If you happen to draw a lot of them, you have Kage Sarashi and Smugi. If you don't have a lot of them, then you can dig for Tasagares with this, especially, again, going first with Hanzo. It's an on-place ability, so you can place it, search, and if you whiff, then you can bounce it back to your hand, call it again, and do the ability again. So this card is extremely powerful in this deck. I think 3 is a fine number for it, and it opens up to the most important card, I think, in the grade 1 lineup. They're all really good, but this one I think is the most important. We have 4 Stealth Rogue of the Night, Sakura Fubuki. This is our deck's counter charger. When placed, if you have 3 or more units, discard a card from your hand. This unit gets plus 3k until end of turn, and if there's 1 or less face-up cards in your damage zone, draw a card and countercharge 1. So this cycles, becomes an 11k booster, which boosting at 12k can make it go up to 43. With like Tasagare Hanzo, for example, or just it puts it at force numbers. Also, you can keep popping this back to your hand to keep using the on-place ability, giving you so much counterblast room for decks that normally counterblast a lot. With this card, you don't even notice it. Also, the combo I was getting into, talking about early game, is you have this, Yami Shibuki, and Magatsu Gale. We'll actually spread it out. So what you do is you ride Magatsu Gale, draw a card, gets plus 6. Then you call Yami Shibuki, and then you call Sakura Fubuki. You refresh the counterblast that you used for Magatsu Gale. You swing 26, and then you use Yami Shibuki to use that freed up counterblast that you have to pop this back into your hand to call 2 Shadow Army Evil Decoy tokens to rear guard. I also play Orfest, a lot of token decks, it's hard to remember. So you can use that for early game defense with an extra 10k shield. Like you can use the Heal Guardian to bump you up to 19 and then have 2 ways of getting to 24. So, and effectively using this card twice, popping it back to your hand to use in a later turn. So you're, by all technicality, using 1 counterblast 3 times. It's a lot of good advantage. So this card is very, 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 very important for the whole game plan of the deck. And that wraps it up for the grade 1s. On to the grade 0s. The rest of our trigger lineup, we have 4 of the Stride Crit. We have 4 of the Draw PG. We have 3 of the D standard draw trigger, you absolutely want to play 7 draws in this deck because you have so many combo pieces that you want to see, and only some of them are searchable in indirect ways. So you want as many draws as possible. This helps the deck grind really well, which is important for the speed that the deck usually operates. And lastly, we have the Dragon Empire Overtrigger. Don't really need to explain that. Gives a unit 100 million, restands your Vanguard. That's pretty good. Just no reason not to run it, even though it should be banned. But we just have to hope that Bushy comes around. Anyways, with that, we will now go into the G zone. We will start off with the G guards. We have one Rikudo Stealth Dragon, Gahoriken. So this unit has the Dominate ability in a unique way. It says Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1. When this unit is placed on guard circle, you may pay the cost. If you do, choose one of your opponent's grade 1 rear guards in his or her back row, dominate it, and move it to the guard circle. So it is a removal of a grade 1, which certain decks like Regalia, for example, this card can be absolutely devastating to them. It's kind of situational, but that's why you run it as a one of. Next, we have a general purpose G-Guard. If you don't have open counterblast, we run 2 Rikudo Stealth Dragon Gando Kuriken. So this unit says when it's placed on guard circle, if the number of cards in your opponent's hand is 3 or more, this unit gains plus 5,000 shield. Then if your opponent has 6 or more, it gains plus 10,000 shield. So usually this is just a 30k shield by itself, which is pretty useful. I mean, that equals a crit sentinel, right? So pretty useful, and it doesn't take any resources to use this card. So I think it at a 2 of is very important. Next, we will go to the new G Guard that we got. We were going to run 2 Rikudo Stealth Rogue Moray Lord. So this unit has the ability when it's placed on guard circle, counterblast 1, and this unit gets plus 5,000 shield until end of battle for each card in your opponent's hand. This card gets huge and blocks really well. And his other ability is if your opponent's hand has 4 or less cards, you may draw a card, or you do draw a card. This card is really good in a lot of situations. Sometimes the counterblast is rough, because you, again, as I said, you use a lot of counterblasts in this deck, so kind of have to set up for this, but it can be useful if your opponent's in low hand to cycle through your deck or block a big attack. This is a more than welcome addition to Nubatama's lineup. Now we are on to the strides, and we have the main stride that you will be going into first and sometimes second. This card is very powerful. We have Rikudo Demonic Dragon Jakumeso. So this unit has the ability when it attacks, retire 2 grade 0s and turn a card from your G zone face up. Draw 2 cards, return all of your rear guards to your hand, and call up to 2 cards from your hand to rear guard. If you called 2 cards, the unit gets plus 10k and plus 1 critical until end of turn. So the neat combo that you can do with this that I mentioned earlier is if you manage to get 2 Tasagare Hanzos into Soul when you stride into this, you call the Gyokusen. So this unit will attack, return all of your rear guards to your hand. The Gyokusen will then trigger once this is finished resolving, and it'll call 2 evil decoy tokens. Now, this unit attacked, and because the heart still has Hanzo in its name, it will trigger your Tasagare Hanzos, and those will be on standby while this unit attacks. By the time you can activate their effect, you can retire those 2 grade 0s to call them out, along with the 2 cards that this calls out, creating 6 or 7 attacks on your first stride while also gaining you card advantage. This card is absolutely amazing. This is like I said, your first stride, and usually a stride you go into if you are low on resources and need to build them back up. This is also useful as like a mirage effect if you're fighting control decks. All around, very good all-purpose card. Next, we are running one of our main tempo plays and sometimes win con, Evil Eye Vidya Emperor Shiranui Rinne. This unit is infamous from G. If you remember it from G, his ability is Act Counterblast 1 and choose a face down card with the same card name as this unit from your G zone and turn it face up. Your opponent chooses 2 cards from his or her hand, calls them to separate rear guard, and they get +5 until end of turn. Dominate them, attack your opponent's Vanguard one at a time. Your opponent cannot activate auto abilities with the cards called due to this effect until end of turn. And then GB3, all dominated units get +10,000 and +1 critical, meaning that once you go into the second stride, your opponent will be incentivized to guard those attacks, obviously, effectively ripping 4 cards out of their hand, which is good by itself. But Mizukaze has an interesting wording. It says, your opponent cannot call cards that he or she has called this turn. So when you use Shiranui Rinne, if you call Mizukaze first, whatever 2 cards they call from their hand, they are then unable to guard with for the rest of the turn, and then they have to deal with 2 15k buffed 2 critical rearguard attacks while under that guard restrict. Absolutely brutal. You can blow your opponent out of the water with that if they are not prepared for it. This is absolutely a 4 of. Next, we go into the rest of our toolbox. Nubatama is very toolboxy, if you haven't noticed yet. Lots of combos that generate card advantage in interesting ways. So the rest of these cards are cards you go into in specific situations that really help with those situations. First up, we have Rikudo Stealth Rogue, Yatsuka Lord. This unit says Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1. Choose 3 unit cards from your opponent's drop, and your opponent chooses any number of cards from among them, calls them to rear guard. Your opponent's cards' auto abilities do not activate from this call. For each unit that was called, your opponent chooses a card from their hand and discards it. For each card that you chose that was not called, you draw a card, and all of your units in the front row gain +10,000 until end of turn. This puts your opponent in a really awkward situation where do they want to call the 3 to deny me any power and then have to discard 3 cards from their hand, or will they just not call any of the cards and you get +30k and draw 3 cards to your hand, or somewhere in between. That's the floor and the ceiling of this card. But again, with Mizukaze, you can save Mizukaze in your hand, choose an opponent's grade 0, grade 1, and grade 3, and offer for them to call it. If your opponent calls any of them, you can then drop the Mizukaze afterward and say, haha, you cannot now guard with those cards the rest of the turn. So this is a good card to go into if your opponent has a good drop zone setup. It's also good if your opponent has a full up board of rear guards, because it forces them to call over rear guards if they do call any of the rear guards that you chose. This is a very welcome addition from Premium Collection, and it like I said, it's situational, but you mainly want to go into this if your opponent has like a large number of cards in hand and you don't have that many, but you want to try and attack your opponent's resource. This is a very good tempo card, I would say. This is a good card if you're in between situations where you need aggression and draw power and minusing the opponent's resources. It just leaves it to the opponent to make that difficult decision. So I like this card a lot. I like the mind games that this card has. That's what I meant to say.
Next we have Enma Stealth King Mugen Lord Daguko, or Dagoku, my bad. Um, its ability is Dominate, act once per turn, counterblast one, turn a card from your G zone face up. Your opponent chooses two cards from face up G units with power from their G zone and calls them to rear guard. Your opponent cannot use their auto abilities. Dominate them and attack your opponent's vanguards one at a time. During that battle, the auto abilities can be used as if they were on Vanguard Circle. So sometimes if your opponent goes into strides that are general purpose, like for example, against Dimension Police like Geoma Glass, um, then you can use this to copy the ability and pressure your opponent further or gain advantage. If they have a unit that restands, you could potentially use that restand against them and attack them additional time. Um, this card is very useful if your opponent has the right G units face up. So definitely keep an eye into what they stride into and think about, can I use this effect for myself specifically for this card. Next up, so people say that this card is not worth running anymore. I disagree. I still really like this card. This is Evil Eye Hades Emperor Shiranui Mukuro. This unit has the Dominate ability. It is Act, GB2, Soul Blast 2, choose a face down card from your G zone and turn it face up. Choose a card from your hand and discard it. Stand and dominate all your opponent's vanguards and attack for that battle. That vanguard battles all of your opponent's rear guards. So they changed the ruling that you can guard against this attack, and your opponent can just drop a 5k guard, because obviously if you check any triggers, you don't want to put it on this because then it's going to be powered up for the rest of the turn. Um, but that's a card that they take out of their hand, and you technically +1 with this ability because you usually do Twin Drive and you only have to discard one. Soul Blast 2 is also not that big of a deal in this deck. So if you're starved for counterblasts and need to try and like chip down the opponent's resources, I find that this is still a very useful card to go into. And then next we have actually another win con in this deck with the Tasagari Hanzos. We have Rikudo Stealth Dragon Sukumura Ken. So this unit has one simple ability, is GB2, Counterblast 2, choose a unit, face down card from the G zone and turn it face up. When this unit is placed on Vanguard, you may pay the cost. If you do, your opponent chooses 4 cards from his or her hand, binds them the rest face down, and then at the end of the turn, your opponent puts the cards bound with this effect into his or her hand. So this pairs the opponent down to 4 cards. They choose 4 cards in their hand, and then that's what they keep for the rest of the turn. If you have this 2 rear guards and multiple Tasagare Hanzos in Soul, you can generate more attacks than the opponent could possibly guard with the cards in their hand, unless any of those cards let them draw additional cards. So basically, this card plus a surplus of Tasagari Hanzos means that you are guaranteed to get 2 damage into the opponent, which is usually enough to kill them. So, very, very, very important card, and a lot of people never expect this coming. So, definitely holds a place in the G zone. And this is sort of a pet card that I still like. I find it useful in late game against super grindy decks if they have a lot of cards in their hand. And I'm just trying to like burn out their resources. Um, is the GB8 Rikudo Stealth Dragon Rokushiki Raken. I probably messed that up, but so his ability is GB8. When your opponent's unit is placed on guard circle from hand, you may counterblast one or soul blast one. If you do, your opponent chooses 2 cards from his or her hand and discards them. So, like against control decks or really grindy decks, I like going for this card if I know Sukumorikan is not going to be able to kill, so I can just absolutely devastate their hand and if it doesn't kill them, then it sets me up to kill them for the next turn. So this is very situational, but I find in the situations it comes up, it is absolutely a lifesaver. So I definitely like to run this card. And that wraps it up for the deck. Um, I believe that this deck is super. I mentioned a bunch of toolbox strategies, but there are ways to apply those cards in multiple situations, and you can even run different go into different stride lineups in your games. This deck was mainly inspired by a good friend of mine, goes by Muji Gant at online. um, my list for the main deck, at least, was mostly inspired from his list. So shout out to him. Great list, has been doing wonders for me.
So that does it for the deck profile. As you can see, there are tons of combos that you can do with this deck. Even like as a protect deck, there are so many aggressive and defensive and even tempo options that you can do with this deck. I went over a good number of them, but with how toolboxy this deck is, there are so many more ways that you could interpret this deck. You can change up the G zone a little bit. There are multiple tools that you can run in the main deck um, to to extend plays in different ways. So really, if you want to get into this deck or this clan, I would recommend really researching all of the cards that are available to you, because this is my way of building it, but I believe that for the most part, there isn't really a wrong way to build a Nubatama deck. Each one is really good at its own thing. So definitely look into the cards, and I hope you enjoyed this profile. Maybe it'll pique your interest in the clan like it did mine. But with that, I will see you all around. Peace.